Hello, it is October 26th, and this is the Memory Team weekly meeting. So jump right into team updates. So we've been discussing in this issue, I'll open up here, about setting a goal for getting the GitLab down to 2 gigabytes or the predefined GCP instance size of 1.8 in a week. It's a bit of a misleading title. This is more about having a tight feedback loop for a week and discussing ideas and hacks and ways that we can quickly get to that footprint, or determining that we can't and maybe documenting like where this is the most streamlined footprint that we can get. I've gotten some feedback on here from a few folks, so I'd like to get more feedback from the team, make sure what week works, start throwing out some ideas, and we can start creating issues so that we have a structure for this when we actually take this work on. So thanks for those that have read and contributed to it so far, and I welcome more feedback before we figure out which week works best for us. So quick poll of the folks that are here. Does the earlier or later week work best for folks, or does it really matter?
Both work for me.
Okay.
The same, yeah.
Cool. Camille, any conflicts for you on either of those weeks?
I don't know yet. Let me answer next week. Okay.
Okay. I would prefer the earlier week because it's the beginning of a milestone. Seems like the best time to start it. But we'll get feedback from Chinyu and Alexi and touch base with Camille again next week. All right. 13.5 retro is due this Friday. I typically have to nag folks beyond the deadline, so please don't make me nag. There's already some good conversations from Matthias brought up about office hours and retro format, so please contribute there. It'd be great to get some feedback. And if there's nothing on those topics, we can jump over to updates. So imagery sizing.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit bare. I just added this. No, I'm still, it's taking a bit longer than I thought it would, but I'm still looking into, yeah, I guess observability related things for image scaling. This kind of came up after we first released it to .com in discussions when I first added runbooks for it, and then it kind of spilled over into other issues as well. And Andrew and Ben are quite keen on getting observability, at GitLab at large into shape, and especially if we add new features on top, we should follow the way we do observability, which is to define SLOs and then define indicators based on metrics that we have or maybe don't have. So that's the bit I'm working on to make sure that we have consistent dashboards where this can all feed into. Yeah, this is kind of like a direct result as well of, I kind of started working on a dashboard that was just meant kind of mostly for us to see like how the scaler performs and, simple things like what the error rate is. And I made me realize you can't even measure it currently what the error rate is. So there's some work to do there. Yeah, so that's what I'm currently looking into. Yep, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Nicholas, is mostly your area here in the cache SQL calls.
Yeah, I forgot to update there. Like the only work that has left at the moment is documentation. So I'm currently working, and there are 3 different issues about writing documentation. So I'm currently updating the documentation for query recorder. And yeah, this week I plan to fully focus on like finishing those documentation. And there is one open MR that is in review. So when it's merged, I think that from the development point of like we can wrap it up there.
Okay. Camille.
So yes, let me link what I'm really like working on right now is basically these 2 ones. And like associated MRs for them. There are some discussions about how to handle the rollout template and how to handle also like ops issue, I mean ops feature flags. And if you look at the like discussion below, there is like a few discussion points. I'm pretty much done with the one forbidding usage of the licensed feature flags, so probably it's gonna be merged early this week. So I'm just gonna be able like to close like one major aspect, and then I will be able to move to docs page for the feature flags. But there is also like this ongoing discussion about the rollout issue and like the handling of that. There are some voices being raised that it should be removed, but I'm not convinced yet. I need to like to spend more time on like this discussion. I have like the like general question, like, did you find the rollout issue useful, or did you find the rollout issue like extra toil that like you don't really want to do when you have like the main issue for the work related to the feature?
I found it useful, and I think it helped to coordinate a bunch of folks, kind of listing the things that maybe aren't necessarily issue worthy, but still needed to get done. So I found the rollout issue to be useful.
Because like there is a discussion about like removing rollout issue, but like at least from my perspective, it serves different purpose. Like the original issue like has like the design of the feature, like the steps, like reasoning. But I'm kind of wondering that if we like merge rollout issue with the original issue, you kind of lose the concise information about how the feature behaves when running on the scale. And like there is already usually so many different details in the issue itself that it's really hard like to comprehend exactly in what state it is, like how it's being designed. And like if we add a set of graphs about related to the rollout, it's gonna be even more mess.
So this is an example of a rollout issue. We're talking about the same thing, right?
Yes, this is the example of the rollout issue, but like, I mean, like, this is interesting because like it's kind of affecting production, but most of our features are affecting production. And there is like another third idea, which is like change management issue, which you create as part of the infrastructure. Matthias, did you create change management issues, or did you were not exposed to that? Not
No,
really.
never heard of it.
So like the idea of the change management issue is like the clear target of the change management issue is folks running infrastructure, which is like SRE and like people running the service to kind of approve and understand exactly how our production system is changing. But like, if you look at the feature flag YAML rollout, it would not fall under change management at all, because it's not really like gitlab.com facing change either. So I guess like there is like a different sides of the rollout, which is like you may want to roll out to the like your local development team. You may want to roll out to like say gitlab.com, but you may also want to roll out to like on-premise customers, which is like enabled by default. So I'm kind of like read this comment and I am trying to gather my thoughts about like the rollout issue versus change management issue versus original issue. But I'm kind of like thinking that it creates, joining together kind of creates more chaos, makes it like harder like to comprehend the information. Even maybe it's more focused, but it makes it harder like to understand in the very specific scope that you're interested, what is actually the state of that. So if you have any thoughts, like feel free to like to look at these issues and provide some feedback.
Was there a specific issue somewhere about like this rollout issue being too much or something? Where did this conversation start from?
Yes, so this is the issue that like Shinya created today. I mean, like from one perspective, it kind of makes sense. But I guess it's I'm not yet convinced really. I need to describe more in the detail, like reasoning and like the consumers of different issues, because I guess it's tricky.
I can only say I agree with you. I find it much cleaner and easier for me as well if I come back to these issues to separate has the actual work been done and how far are we to actually shipping this to everyone. To me, that's two totally different shoes. And yeah, like there's often like a lot of history in GitLab issues that are feature or product focused. So having a separate issue where I have a simple step-by-step list that you can check off, and I can just look at this and at a glance see how far are we away from like fully rolling this out. I find it super useful.
So I guess like one of the concerns that it's there today, it's like we usually close the original issue when the work is merged, but it's not yet enabled by default. And maybe this is like the confusing part, because like you should not close your issue until it's fully rolled out, but it's also against iteration, really. You should close the issue as soon as possible and create a follow-up issues to roll out that. So, Josh, like, how you find the information about whether a feature is rolled out or not, whether it's enabled by default or not?
You have to ask.
How do you know if you can like merge the release posts for the given feature?
Product managers gave up on that. We didn't know. So the answer is we delegate it to engineering managers. And engineering managers merge the release posts. Because
I think like this is like the main aspect really that I wanted to solve with this whole process. Like create a anchor point that says to you, once this is closed, it means like it's fully rolled out. It means that like it's ready to be released to the public. Because like our current flow is like you close the main issue as soon as works is kind of like validated, but it kind of creates this kind of like chaos between something that is not chaos, like uncertainty between something that is like closed and release post, because where you as a PM doesn't have the information exactly if it's rollout to whom. Is it on premise by default? Because release post should be merged only if it's on premise by default, but maybe not always. Maybe in some cases we say beta or something like that to indicate that features are maybe not complete. So I was kind of thinking that maybe like one of the ways to approach that is like extend release post template with the name of the feature flag behind the given feature is gated, and like you as a PM, you just go to a page that shows all our current feature flags and their state. And this is your information, whether you know whether something is enabled by default or not. This is like your gate, and this is your only place of the information. And then really like the rollout issue tracks how far we are into the process of making something on by default. Because like, and there is like another confusion that it's really like, change management is meant for the gitlab.com, but the rollout issue is really like meant for the default on. I mean, feature being default on, which is like gitlab.com is subset of the rollout issue, but rollout issue idea is also that like you remove the feature flag and only then you should be able to close the rollout issue once you remove that, or like maybe enable that by default, but then kind of like you still continue tracking that the feature flag is still there. So something along these lines.
Yeah, it's really confusing I think for everyone involved. It's not clear to, it's not always clear to the engineering manager, frankly. And so they have to go try and track it down. It's my experience. So it's less clear to the product manager. And then it's even less clear as you move like away from engineering, right? Like once you get to the TAMs and the SAs, they have, they see the issues closed, the MR is landed, but they have no idea if they can tell their customer, hey, this thing shipped. And then of course, customers have even less information. So,
so like
clear.
from your perspective, would it make sense like to extend release post template, but like with the link to the feature flag or like the feature flag gate that is behind? So kind of like making you as a person to look at the feature flag state to know whether something is on by default. Because like from your perspective, this is really like the relevant information that if there is feature flag, it's on by default, or if there is no feature flag, it means that it was removed, which means it's on by default in that case.
Yeah, it might not even make it to the release, but it could make it in the release post template. That'll make it very clear and transparent. But also just having like maybe in the MR somewhere or something like that, like this is the feature flag name that's going to be utilized for controlling the rollout, and then we all can just know where to go check. We generally have avoided trying to expose the whole feature flag process to customers because we haven't built any UI in GitLab self-managed as far as managing the feature flag states. It's always kind of been like a internal implementation detail, and on rare occasion we've exposed it, like for truly experimental features, like the early days of Gitlab cluster and things like that. But to date we haven't really exposed the customers. But I think it'd be great to have on the MR, have like the feature name somewhere put down, the feature flag name, and then we could put the release post template. We might not expose it, I don't think, but that would be a nice source of truth to understand easily where something is when you're determining whether release post item should be merged or not. It just might not get presented. Probably not.
So now
Like
that I've
in the actual
reread the issue that Camille linked, so this one, I think this is more specific to the actual feature flag process and not specific to having a more general kind of long-term rollout. So this is a rollout for the entire feature flag YAML epic, whereas this talks about removing, you have, let's see.
Yes, like the rollout issues you create as part of the creating new feature flag, really. That's the whole intent.
My understanding of reading this issue is there's an issue for the specific feature itself, and then an issue for the specific feature flag that you're rolling out. And from what I'm reading of this proposal is they want to remove this template.
Yes,
and
that's exactly the idea, that like right now, like we have the template that gives you some structured way what to expect with the rollout of the given feature flag. And this is like the anchor point. I mean, by design, it should be the anchor point to the PM to understand how far we are in the rollout of the given feature, because like this rollout issue is directly connected with the MR that is, or like the feature flag that is introducing. So, and like if you look at the steps below, one of the steps is like removal of the feature flag. And technically, the intent of this rollout issue is like, it's something to be scheduled by engineering manager as well, because you want to remove the feature flag as soon as possible, as soon as you confirm that everything is working, because it's a technical debt. So the rollout issue is really about like rolling out the feature and removing that feature flag from the code base. So having like only a single path. And this is exactly like the last two steps of this template. Like you want to really clean up after yourself, to not have this matrix of the combinations that we have today. And like this tries to like describe the whole process of the testing the feature flag, maybe not the best way how it's like structured today, but it's something like to start with, really. And it kind of also gives you like a hint, if you follow these rollout steps, how far we are into the process of the rollout, which means also like how far we are into of enabling that by default. But like it's like the intent of this issue is like it looks at the whole process of the rolling out of the feature flag, but like there is also like infrastructure interested in the change management issue, which is like more specific for like enabling some very specific bit on the gitlab.com in a specific time period. And like this kind of like slightly creates a confusion how to handle like this whole rollout of the feature flag. And the proposal says like, let's remove this rollout issue completely. Let's move that into our original issue, and let's keep this rollout as part of the original issue, which kind of it's also sketchy because like, would it mean that this issue stays long as we don't enable this feature flag by default? I mean, this is not usually the way how we work. Like we usually tend to close the issue as soon as we finish this milestone, and like we create a follow-up issues with the next steps, which could be like enabled by default. And this is exactly the rollout issue, what it's really meant for. So I don't know. It's
No, I agree with you. I think the rollout template makes sense to me. It's a specific purpose for what's happening with the feature flag, whereas the issue is separate. It's conversation for how and what is being created. So I will read and throw in my 2 cents later on the issue. But thanks for bringing it up.
I agree. That right now there's no sort of truth for what's going on with the feature flag usually, or it's just spread to like a bunch of infra issues or something like that. It's really hard to understand what's going on. And so having a single place to look to understand what the process is and what our goals are and success metrics for like continuing on a rollout would be really interesting.
there is also another challenge, like it's like developers or like engineers, they don't really spend a lot of time on describing the success criteria. I mean, in general, like if you kind of doing rollout, you should know exactly what metrics you are looking at. You should know exactly the outcome. And like, even if you look at this like associated rollout issue of the Canary ingress, this one, and like scroll up, like there is a section which says, what are we expecting to happen? What may happen if this goes wrong? What can we monitor to detect problems with that? And it's blank. Like that's the whole purpose of the rollout. Like you document, not for you because you know that, you document that for anyone else that may be interested in that information. So this rollout issue is not for you. This rollout issue is for everyone else to understand, if you are not around, how to deal with this feature, or like how to roll back, or like what patterns you are looking at if something is going off. Is it like this thing that is causing this being off? So this is, I mean, this is also the challenge like with the rollout issue. Like we don't really take the rollout issue very seriously to kind of spend enough time to feel the details about the rollout issue in kind of providing this comprehensive information for other people. And it could be also interesting, like to support team later, if they see this rollout issue, they could look at these graphs and understand, I saw that pattern as part of this rollout issue. Maybe this is this flag that is enabled by default that is causing this behavior change. So,
and the other thing that would help was actually linking to the, for lack of a better term, the feature issue. They're not, the rollout and the feature issue are not linked together. So again, we'd have to figure out how to backtrack.
yes, and there is another issue in the improve epic, which says create a bot to validate the rollout issue completeness. And as part of this completeness could be also like linking and cross-linking all the relevant pieces of the information. Because like my perception is like, now you go to the docs.gitlab.com page where you see all the feature flags. What is their current state? And maybe what changed between 13.4 and 13.5? You see that this feature flag changed from the false to true. And there you get like the link to the MR that introduced that, and link to the rollout issue that gives you like an exact details about how we are rolling out this feature, like what are the metrics that are interested to you, what to look for. And like from the MR, you can usually very easily go to the original issue. But if you go to our original issue, it's really hard to find information about like the rollout and how this feature like is being rolled out. So at least from my perspective, like asking MR and the rollout issue, the intent for that was really like two types of people, like three types of people, PM, SRE, and support, because they can really go to the docs, they can quickly find the relevant feature flag, find exactly which MR got introduced if they really need to check, and find the rollout issue. If the rollout issue and all boxes has marked, it means that this feature is like complete, it's fully rolled out, and like it's like done. Of course, like maybe we could still like link the epic or maybe original issue for completeness, but this kind of information can be taken from the MR context. Milestone can be taken from the MR context to which the given feature flag was assigned. Like the group we already put, but like from the Git log, we can get also like who created that feature flag, individual. But like my intent was like to not point on the individuals, rather point on the group, because it's usually a group that understands all the semantics behind that feature flag, because like we work in the group, not as individuals. So it's kind of a little of the backstory that I was kind of thinking behind MR rollout group, and like how these different pieces of the information play together, and how like you can make like Josh or Grant to have this like very specific information, who to reach to understand the given feature flag, and like how it's being rolled out, what are the metrics you are looking for, and things like that, and like how it changed between different releases, and as well how it changed on the gitlab.com that may affect gitlab.com stability. So
no, I agree with you. I think there should be a separate issue, and in general, I think issues should be as specific as they can be, and they shouldn't have like in this, add this feature and track the rollout progress. I think they should be separate but linked. So.
So my 2 cents, like while we were working on like rolling out the atomic processing, like the main issue was really big and complex and full of different like infos that were related to the development and change logic. But then we had separate rollout issue that was not part at that time of the templating or anything else, but it was really easy to follow up the release process. Like you could always see the current status, like if the feature flag was enabled, for whom it was enabled. When we like disabled because of the bug, you could find the issue that at the moment the rolling out is paused because we found an issue there. And we posted also a lot of different like metrics there, so you can follow the like rolling out process, which would be really difficult to follow in the main issue because it contained a lot of different things. So I look at the rollout issue as some to-do list that you can like go and check and place the metrics, and you can always check easily the current status, or you can find in comments like this was like enabled, like this feature flag was enabled at that time, and you can even link to the chatbot there and see the time when it was enabled, and you can easily, if something is wrong, disable it and follow up like the status and everything else. So it's much more clear to me, especially for like some complex issues like atomic processing was. Maybe for some small issues, they could be integrated into the one, but for the more complex issues that have a lot of conversation, I think my personal opinion is it's better to have one place to follow.
I mean, like, but like, I guess like for the simple issues, like you're not gonna spend half hour or 1 hour to creating this issue. It's gonna spend 2 minutes
agree.
or 3 minutes, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
agree.
simple by definition, and it's like you're gonna close this issue fairly quickly as well. So like the cost of the creating that issue is like is fully relative to the complexity of the feature flag. But like I mean, like we have the same guideline, like you should create a feature flag that is off by default, because like our rollout of gitlab.com is not like atomic. It's rather like a rolling window. So like we already impose like a very strict, sorry, not very strict, like a different like behavior of the rolling of the feature because how our system is built, and like the information that you are providing, you're not providing that for yourself because you already know all the details. You're providing that for everyone else that may be affected by that. So I need to write a few words. I just need to figure out exactly which one.
Cool.
Okay, jump back to the agenda here. We got through everything. Chinyu copied his update on sorry, investigating the memory leak for Sidekick Killer and looking into zlib. So you can read up on that later. Unless there is anything else to talk about, I wanted to go back to a couple of things. So on the synchronous week to talk about GitLab 2 GB footprint, it does depend on us wrapping up 13.6. I want to make sure that we finish all the things in flight, the documentation, including like the blog post for image resizing, the documentation for cached queries. Those are important to get out there and finish up so they don't continue to linger, along with the underlying like image resizing, making sure that wraps up, and the implementation for cache SQL queries and anything else, well, the majority of what's in flight. So is anybody concerned about what's currently in the 13.6 timeline and the ability to close it out within the milestone?
I'm not totally sure. Like there hasn't been really any movement on the caching related stuff. So one thing that would be useful to have was to get like an updated figure for cache hit rates in production based on CDN logs. That was something that Igor had helped us out with in the past. So I created an issue for this in the infra issue tracker, but there hasn't been any movement yet on that. So we're kind of still waiting on that. So that's kind of why I switched back to the observability stuff. Yeah, because the main problem with this issue is that it's not really clear what the goal is here, right? Because we don't really know what do we need to do? Like how bad is the problem if we would go ahead without any kind of caching solution? And it's kind of, it ties in as well with what Alexei started working on before he left for PTO, which was to verify performance on self-managed that has stalled as well. So yeah, I don't know, either we can try to like pick these up in parallel so that we can make progress on this during the next week. Yeah. Wait, so did you say until the end of 13.6? So that is, that's still a couple weeks away, right?
Yeah. So
I
November
think it
17th.
should be fine. I think it should be fine. I mean, it's just like caching is a bit of a question mark right now. Even what is the goal here, you know? And that, because only that will inform what we have to do. There's a couple like smaller things we could just do, but if we just do them, it kind of goes a little bit against the idea that we verify that any performance improvements we do actually improve the situation, right? Because we want to have a clear before after picture, and we can't have that if we don't have a clear before picture, for which we need at least the CDN figures for cache hit rates.
Yeah. Josh, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that as far as the goals, I think we just want to try and exit 13.6 with an understanding of how this behaves in self-managed. So we can either have a release post which says, hey, beta for self-managed, or just fully GA and non by default for self-managed, right? Because I don't think, we don't want to release this on by default and then end up, leading to degraded instances on some of the more heavily utilized instances because of 100% resizing rate. So that's my main concern. So just I think from to double click one level deeper, the question is really like for self-managed without the use of, seems like two CDNs we have in .com right now. What is the difference in CPU consumption, right? But with it on and off, and I think if that's within 5% of each other or 10% of each other, right? Like in absolute terms, it's probably fine. If we're talking about something more substantial, then we probably need to provide guidance. Still release it. I think we're going to try and provide guidance to people as far as what to expect.
No, that sounds totally sensible. I think, so last time I looked at that issue about verifying performance for self-managed, it sounded like Alexia was working with Grant on this, but I'm not entirely sure if they're actually looking at this.
I think so. I think the question is that one of the challenges, and Grant looks like had to drop, but one of the challenges is the GPT tool uses K6, which is a load testing tool, which doesn't actually care about the results. So it fires the HTTP request and then does not process the response. And so it's not going to do any kind of follow-up asset downloads. And so you kind of need a browser to go do that. Or you have to go in and tell K6 to specifically download certain URLs as asset downloads, but you have to tell them exactly what those URLs are. So that might be fine. I'm not sure what the path is, but I think that's the problem to solve, which is to do more of an actual browser-based load test versus fire and forget HTTP requesting.
So Josh, if we're unable to validate the impact on self-managed within the next couple weeks, say give us a week lead time before the actual release date, what's the plan then? Do we ship it as default off, or do we ship it as on and give them the documentation saying, hey, if you see a CPU increase on this, then just go ahead and turn it off using this ops flag?
Yeah, so I think we want to. I think if we're still stuck as far as figuring out how to understand what the impact is more broadly, it's probably worth adding a configuration flag on this, because I don't think feature flags are usable enough to really expect our users to deal with it. Is my sense, and so it might be worth the overhead of a config flag, and then just telling people, hey, you can opt in with this GitLab RB flag or something like that. But I'd rather not do it if we can avoid it.
Right. No, I was thinking because we have an open issue for something that I didn't know we had before, actually, which are what do we call them, Camille? Operational feature flags or something? They're feature flags, right? But they're basically just these perpetual feature flags that we never lift. And they're just a simple way of turning things on and off that sit more at the infrastructure level. So that it sounds like this is something we haven't done before. And I think the idea, and not just for self-managed, but also for .com, it's always good if you have a safety switch. So there was a start to convert these two layered more rollout oriented feature flags that we have into one of these operational infrastructure flags that would just stay there forever.
Yeah, I mean, we could expose it as a UI settings option as opposed to config, and then it's easier to just sort of flip back and forth. I'm not sure if that would work. I'm not sure whether we can have a runtime application-based setting, which then changes whether this works or not.
This reminds me, we kind of have a way already to turn off image scaling, at least on the way out from Workhorse, because we have this piece of config, and those are like two of the sorry, only one is open. So there's like an OpenMR that I'm still waiting for feedback on, which changes the Helm charts to add this config, which is just this number that we said. It's like a cap for the maximum number of scalar processes. Well, actually, more correctly said, it's a cap for the number of parallel requests that are allowed to be in the system simultaneously for image scaling. It's again another safety switch, and I actually tested this. It's totally fine to set this to 0, and this will just reject any image scaling request immediately and fail over to serving the original image. It's not as clean as being able to turn it off via feature flag, though, because this actually will still instrument the code path of the scalar, and it has like different like caching behavior, for instance. That's something we found during the caching app pick. So, but it is kind of a safety switch. So we could also just document that and tell users just as a fallback, if we don't want to add another toggle.
Yeah, it's we want to try to avoid configuration if at all possible, but if for some reason it's gonna take us a long time to try and figure out like what the safety is, we can also just, it's not great, but we're essentially putting the risk on our customers to be like, yeah, you can try it, and then you can turn it off if it like blows up your instance. Which I'd be curious on your thoughts. My guess is it's probably not going to blow things up because of browser caching, but I don't know. So I feel like, if we're really concerned, we should just not even tell people about it until we have more confidence in it. But if we're sort of concerned, we can probably tell people it's experimental or something like that and let them try it, and because we don't think it'll hurt them.
I think I'm with you there from like just a pure gut feel perspective, that I'm not too concerned about it because of browser caching, because we do write a max age cache control header still, and it's the 300 seconds. So we'll be cached for, what is that, 5 minutes? So if you have a well-behaved HTTP client and they actually which browsers should be, right?
Yeah, so Camille, I guess you're saying is, and then maybe Matthias too, your point was that we can actually sort of limit the number of threads that we have running, and it'll just fall back gracefully.
No, we do that. Yeah, that's part of. I guess I didn't even mention this explicitly earlier, but that's basically those two MRs that I took over from Alexei before he left on PTO. That for Omnibus that is already merged. The MR for Workhorse is in maintainer review, which defaults it to exactly this. And in Helm, that's an OpenMR. It's a bit trickier because the notion of CPU cores doesn't really make sense in Kubernetes because you work with resource limits. So we have to approach it a little bit differently. But we also set it to a low value in Helm. So that would be, that we do anyway. So sure, that's just a safety toggle, right? So yeah, like it protects us as well. Like if for some reason image scaling should be super slow on a customer installation, I can't even come up with a good reason. Maybe because this system otherwise is under load. Then if for some reason too many of these scalar requests would be kind of in flight and not finished quickly enough, and a new one would come in that would exceed this threshold, we've had that logic from day one. It will be rejected. It's just like on day one when we launched it, that limit, this cap was very high. So that's why we send all these MRs to bring that down. Does that make sense?
Okay. Looks like Camille's got to drop off. I need to drop in a few minutes too, but we have, I listed our link to the ops flag issue. Sounds like we've got some thread safety in there, and seems like the ops flag right now until we can actually confirm self-managed. Seems like a good idea to keep that for a while, and maybe eventually the long term is just remove that when we determine the optimal configuration for this, or if this works just fine and we no longer have a need for it, we can remove it in a future milestone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if we can
so-
cap risk on this, then that makes me more comfortable effectively by saying we can limit the number of compute spent on this to not disrupt instances.
So like ops flag is really like meant to be a fail-safe, like the last resort fail-safe. If something goes terribly wrong, you can dynamically disable the given feature and like you have instant relief. But like development, you should remove or migrate to ops. But ops kind of indicates that we don't kind of intend on removing this flag anytime near future. So like from our perspective, it's like a calculated technical debt that we are taking basically. As for the performance aspect that like we may be not fully certain of, but like we also don't want to say that this is regular development flag, because it's not really regular development flag. It's rather like a fail-safe mechanism that allows you to dynamically reconfigure the system. Because Matthias, like your change with the workhorse, it actually requires chef change, upgrading all workhorse nodes or Kubernetes nodes, basically, or pods. It takes a lot of time, and toggling feature flag, it's like basically almost instant thing to do. So this is really ops meant for, like long-living feature flag that may provide a relief if we find something being super imperformant, and it allows us to react that instantaneously, basically. But from our perspective, like it's our calculated risk that that we kind of keep this feature flag for these reasons.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I didn't mean to say that this should replace. I think they kind of complement each other, these things. Yeah, I don't think we should have just one of them. We should have both. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying either that they should replace, but this is like the fundamental thinking behind the ops. That if it's something that like we want to kind of clean up from our backlog of the feature flags, we should migrate them to the ops and kind of acknowledge that this is something that we are intend to keeping this long term, really, without any expiration date.
I think the ops flag makes sense in this case. I think it would be hard to test all the permutations of the different way that self-managed is set up. So, but it's the opinion of one. So if everybody else disagrees, then yeah, I'm okay with it. All right, and I was going to talk a little more about the retros, but since we're running out of time, I will just add my thoughts asynchronously. So thanks everybody for the feedback. Good meeting. Happy Monday.
Thank you.
Monday.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye bye.